Hello, wonderful people. My name is Casey Bailey, and today I'm going to talk to you about legacy. And I'm going to talk to you about what I think is the importance of focusing not so much on making history, but on making the future. And I'm going to try and get into where this idea came from and hopefully give you some tips on how to think about things going forward. So, this concept kind of crystallized for me a few years ago. I was on holiday with my wife in Barcelona. And my wife is a visual artist, an amazing visual artist, and I kind of like art. And we decided that when we were in Barcelona, we were going to take in everything that we could. There's so many different cultural sites, so many amazing things to see, and we wanted to see all. But the one thing that we specifically knew that we wanted to see before we went was the Sagrada Familia church. It's like a big church, cathedral type building in the middle of Barcelona, stunning. And we'd seen pictures of it, and we were like, this is it. This is what we're going to see in Barcelona. And we got there, and it's stunning. We stand in front of it, and we're looking up at this amazing building it's like everything you've seen on the pictures or the postcards, but it's bigger, and it's even more beautiful. And it was designed by a guy called Gaudi. And as we walk around the building, I'm talking to my wife about the design and what I think is amazing about it. And we get to this part of the building which looks cleaner than the side that we've just seen, nicer. And I look up and there's a man on a crane, and he looks like he's doing work on the building. And I said to my wife, babe, he's working on the building, like they're working on it, like building it. And she said, don't be ridiculous. It's like a grade 1 listed building. Like they wouldn't be working on the Sagrada Familia. They're probably sandblasting it. That's why this side looks so much cleaner. So I said, okay, I'll let that slide. And off we went. And back in the hotel, it was bugging me. I kind of couldn't get it out of my head, so I looked it up. And it turns out the Sagrada Familia was still being built. And even right now, as I'm talking to you, the Sagrada Familia is still being built. And it turns out the reason is this man, Gaudi, when he was commissioned to build the building, he knew that the size and the magnitude of building he wanted to design and he wanted to create, they'd never be able to build it in his lifetime. He would not be alive by the time it was completed. And so he came up with a plan. And his plan was he would design one face of the building that was considerably smaller than the other two. And he would design it in a way that it could be built while he was alive, but it was distinctive. And because of the way he built this face, any architect who came onto the project once he passed away wouldn't really be able to change his original design. And he started thinking not just about what he was doing right now and what people would say about it and wanting to see his amazing building. He started thinking about what people were going to have to do when he wasn't even around anymore. And he shaped what they were going to have to do when he wasn't even around anymore. So despite my wife thinking that they weren't still working on the building, they were. They still are. And this gets me thinking about legacy and this idea that we have in our head about legacy, because I think often when we think about legacy, we think about what will people say about me? Like, how will I be reviewed? What will people say once I'm gone? And there's lots of different dictionary definitions of legacy, but one is around what somebody leaves for us, what a predecessor leaves for us. And I think when we think about legacy, we don't think so much about what we leave. We think about what will people say about what I leave. And what Gaudi did is he shaped what people would do when he was gone, not just what would be said about him. What would people actually do when I'm gone? If you think about another example of this, there's a great example right here in Birmingham, which is a town hall. If you ever look at or go past a town hall, it's a huge building, and you might think it was built relatively recently, or you might think it was built a long time ago. But what's interesting about it is when it was built, the population of Birmingham was less than 100,000. And this building is still functional, still used today. And the reason is when they built it, they knew the population of the city was growing rapidly. And they'd made a conscious decision, let's not build a building for what we need now. Let's build a building that will be able to serve this city long after we're all gone, which it still does to this day. And I think for me, for a long time was caught up very much on the idea of what can I achieve, what can be my achievements. And I remember sitting in a ceremony where there was awarding a blue plaque to someone who had long since passed away. And they were talking about all of this person's achievements. And I started thinking to myself, I haven't done enough. And most people who know me would say, Casey, you've done quite a bit. But in my head, I was like, I haven't, like, this man has done all of this. I haven't done enough. But what I've come to realize is the real important things that we do are not the things that come with the accolades and the titles. There is something bigger, more rewarding and more important that we can do. And ultimately, most of us will never have a Sagrada Familia. Most of us, when time goes by, we won't be in the history books. They won't write our names down. We will not become part of history, but we will build the future. We will shape it. We will turn it into what we want it to be. And sometimes we do that without seeing it. And that's what makes it difficult. And when I think about that, I want to share a story. It's a series of stories, but I want to share a story about how you can affect something and not even see those effects. So I'm a teacher, amongst a million other things, I'm a teacher. And years ago, I'm older than I look, I promise. Years ago, I taught a boy, and he was an unruly character. He got into problems, he got into trouble, and it seemed like he wasn't going to make it through school. And I spent a lot of time working with him, and it was a big part of my job to work with him and students like him. And he made it through school, he survived school, as he puts it, went off, did his A-levels, qualified to be a teacher. And the first time I saw him after he qualified, he said, I wanted to be a teacher because I wanted to have the impact on people's lives that you had on mine. And that's powerful, like beyond words. If I think about all of the achievements that I have, that surpasses all of them, that somebody feels like they wanted to be able to do for people what I did for them. And he told me a story about a boy who he's teaching. The boy is a very talented dancer, and he's a very talented writer. And he had the opportunity to go on 2 kind of like residentials or camps at the same time. And he was stressing because he had to choose, does he go on the writing camp, does he go on the dancing camp? And his teacher, my former student, told me the story about how he said to this boy, don't close doors on yourself, because you don't know whether you'd be able to somehow do both. And what the boy did in the end is he checked with the leaders of the groups and the camps, and he did most of the writing residential. Then he went off to the dance trip and did the writing residential remotely in the evening. And the significance of my former student telling me this story isn't that he made this big impact on this boy's life. I told him to stop closing doors on himself when he was 15 years old, crying in my office, I can't do this, I'll never do that, I told him, stop closing doors on yourself, because other people will close doors on you all your life. You don't need to do it to yourself. And he told me this story not to show me the impact that he'd had on this boy, but to remind me of the impact that I had had on him. And he said the boy told him, when I'm grown up and I'm famous, because that's what we all say when we're 15, when I'm famous, because that's the pinnacle when you're 15 years old, I'm going to write a book. And the book's going to be called Stop Closing Doors on Yourself. Now, you might think that's a terrible example of when you can shape the future without knowing, because I clearly know, because I'm telling you all about it. But I didn't just come up with those words. I didn't wake up one morning and go, stop closing doors on yourself. That's something that my dad said to me. And he said it to me throughout different parts of my life. But when I was a boy and I thought I couldn't do certain things, he told me, Casey, stop closing doors on yourself. Other people will do that enough for you. And it stuck. And because he said that to me, I said it to this boy. And because I said it to this boy, he said it to another boy. And now you have someone talking about writing a book about it. And if in 10 years' time, 20 years' time, 30 years' time, somebody was to try and write my life story, they wouldn't mention it. It would have no significance whatsoever. No one would talk about the time that I taught that boy and told him to stop closing doors on himself. But if his student writes a book, and in 100 years' time, one of my great-grandchildren reads the book, or your great-grandchildren, or anybody reads the book and decides they're going to do something today because they're not going to close a door on themselves, how profound could the impact of my dad's words to me become? Words that he never really thought about the impact of. And that sticks with me because we get lost in what can I achieve, and we lose sight of what can I do. What can I just actually do? And that brings me to a quote from another great artist. I would put him in the Gaudi category. I don't know if everybody would. And that great artist is Tupac Shakur. And Tupac Shakur said, I am not saying that I'm going to change the world, but I guarantee that I will spark the mind that will change the world. And that is another person thinking beyond themselves. Like, let's not worry about what people will say about me. What will they do? What will what I have said today or done today make people do? And so what I want to ask of you, really, is to think about the way you are going to make the future. And I want you to accept the fact or focus on the fact that it's not that important what people say about you after you've gone. It's more important what people do because you were there. And how can you make sure that what you do makes other people do something or feel something which is positive, even if all you do is make someone smile. In fact, especially if what you do is make someone smile. Focus on what they do because you were there. I also want you to accept that you can't necessarily see the amazing impact of all of your great work. You're not necessarily going to see the outcomes of all the great things that you do. You can't build your forest around you, but you can plant it and it will grow. And really, I want you to know that, I know it's a bit cliche and cheesy, but the future really is yours. But it's not made. It's not finished. You have to build it. You have to create it. You have to make it what you want it to be. And there's a reason why I think it's important to think like this. Because when you start thinking about the impact of what you do, what people do because you were there, it takes the burden off worrying about achievements, accolades. Get that out of your mind. What is going to happen because I was here is going to allow you to focus and act in a different manner. When you think about the fact that you won't see all of the amazing outcomes of your work, you stop worrying about whether you've done enough. Like, how often do we get caught up in, have I achieved enough? Have I done enough? Have I done what I wanted to do today? You've done more than you know. You've done more today than you even realize. And tomorrow it will have an impact that you won't even see. So get out of your mind this idea of, have I done enough? You've done more than you know. And the reason that I kind of want us to accept that we're building the future is because then we'll take it seriously. We will mold it every single day. And even if you only make this much of the future, you'll want that bit that you make to be amazing. Nothing that you do is throwaway. The way you speak to people, the way you act around people, the way you treat people, the hug that you give to the person that you don't really know, but you could see that they needed a hug. These things have a knock-on effect in building the future that we live in. And other than that, I've just got one more thing that I want you to do, and it's not really from me, it's from my dad. And that thing is, don't close doors on yourself. Other people will do that enough, and you don't need to do it. We won't all have our Sagrada Familia. We won't all go down in history, but we will all make the future. Thank you.